Hello, I am Panos Kotzathanasis, and this is ASEAN Movie Pulse interviews. Today I'm here with Devashish Makhija, whose film Joram is now screening in Rotterdam. How are you, Devashish?
Like I said, very, very cold.
Okay, okay. All right, all right. So tell me a bit, what was the inspiration behind the film? How did you come up with this story?
I'd written this story years ago, in fact. And like all, I think, independent artistic films, it takes many, many years to travel from a script to finding a producer to attaching people, getting it on the field, getting it made, getting it done in time, and having a festival premiere. So it's been a 7 to 8 year journey on this film as well.
Hmm, hmm,
I've been like you have written about Ajji and Bhosle, my previous films as well. I've been obsessed with social inequity and developmental politics and the price that we continue to pay for the trappings of consumeristic, capitalistic lives that we have all signed up for. So somewhere this film goes, I think, closer to the roots of the problem. Goes into the jungles, goes into the displacement of indigenous people and mining and rebellion and all the questions of unsustainability of the lives that we have chosen. So all of these things are themes and ideas and questions I've been obsessed with in all my films. But this one actually predates all my other films. I've been questioning these things and researching and traveling to the tribal areas and trying to see firsthand the dreadful impact of these choices that we make for almost a decade and a half. So this film was really an exploration and a culmination of all that questioning.
hmm, hmm. And
Just yeah,
sorry, please continue.
I sought to make it before I made my previous features, but it just took longer to get made.
Hmm, hmm. Okay, and the portrayal of the life of tribal people in the film, how close to the reality would you say that it is?
It's borrowed from reality, and we've shot in authentic tribal villages. We've shot in tribal areas. We've cast a lot of tribals in the smaller parts, but given that it's an exercise in narrative fiction, I often in films like this one, I don't I don't risk uh, only using authentic fact because I'm not a tribal. I'm I haven't lived that life. It's not in my DNA. I have not seen that history unravel before me. I am at best a second uh, person perspective. So I feel I'm duty bound. It's respectful to not be so authentic that I will get things wrong.
Hmm, hmm,
So I have borrowed extensively from reality, and but I have fictionalized the tribe. I have fictionalized the names of the places. I have taken those liberties so that hoping that then the story becomes almost like a fable. It becomes metaphorical. It becomes it represents a larger narrative, hopefully, that is playing out across the globe. The same stories are playing out in Brazil. The same stories are playing out in a lot of countries where not just indigenous people, but all kinds of people who don't have access to a framework of justice, a social framework of justice, cannot fight for their rights, and they make way for unsustainable, developmental, monstrous machines uh, that sort of build these city worlds that we are now progressively more and more of us are inhabiting. So I wanted this film also to rise above. I mean, yes, it's so local, hopefully, that it becomes global, but I also want to rise above being so beholden to fact that it doesn't become as universally accessible that a story like this could be. So that's
hmm,
also one of the reasons why I fictionalized a lot of things. So when you see the tattoos on these tribals, it's not a particular tribe. We researched many tribes, and my entire team, the costume design team, the makeup team, we sat together and came up with the tattoos and the costumes. I shouldn't use the word costumes, but the clothes and the accessories that the tribe in our film would wear.
And do you think that this way of life is going to be extinct in the future? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the lives of the tribal people? I mean, these areas in particular.
So it almost already is. There is very little of what you see in the film. There's very little of it left. 90% of the tribals we meet on our travels, even if they're living in their village, wear shirts and pants because they are now interacting. There is so much of interaction with people from the city that after a point there is no escape. I mean, uh, if you want to be, if as someone who's on the margins of the so-called urban mainstream society, if you want to engage, if you want to find a way to be acknowledged in the mainstream so that you can access justice and your basic rights, you probably have to start looking like the people in the mainstream and start talking and eating like the people in the mainstream. So all of those things have percolated tribal life. There's no escaping it.
Mhm, mhm. And the film in the beginning portrays some of those people that they are working on the construction site, and they seem to have no papers, like no
Yeah.
official entity. How does that work? How do they survive without any kind of identification, let's say?
It's very convenient for the people who run those construction sites. It serves them really well. So a lot of migrant laborers, so most of the people who are working the lowest rung of the migrant labor chain, they are daily wage laborers. They get paid by the day. And often they don't get paid what they are promised because there's no register or document where that promised fee is documented. So it serves the contractors who run these construction sites to not have people who have ID who can even complain against them. So there is the construction sites that we chose to shoot on. So there are two kinds of construction sites broadly. There are those that follow safety protocols that have certain systems in place. So if they make stacks of stones that need to be used in the construction, they will be made in spaces that someone can will not stumble into or fall on. So it's properly demarcated and it's not chaotic.
Mhm,
But there are a lot of construction sites to save money, and they put up those buildings in record time. In 3 to 6 months, an entire building is up. There is a lot of pilferage, there is a lot of contamination, and I'm forgetting the right word, but there's spurious materials that are used. So they can't have systems, they can't have safety protocols because that brings with it a level of inspection and filtering of corruption. So they hire laborers who do not have ID, who cannot go to the police and say that so and so cheated me, so and so didn't have safety protocols, so my husband died. They can't go anywhere. And a city like Bombay has so many people coming from outside of it looking for job opportunities that a lot of migrant labor agreed to do work for almost nothing.
mhm,
So these construction sites are chaotic. So there will be spikes, large iron spikes sticking out of the ground where someone can get killed. And every 2 3 days, one construction worker falls to his death from the 10th floor, 12th floor. Because on all those floors, if you saw in the film, they're living inside those floors because there's no space to even construct a shanty on the ground floor to stay in. So these are unfinished floors. So if there's a shaft, that will be the garbage shaft eventually in the building. Right now, it's open because it's not been sealed. So at
mhm,
night, someone walking with, and there aren't enough big lights to light your way. There is no, if you see those ticker tapes in the film, we put those ticker tapes because we were afraid for our crew. But when those laborers are working on those buildings, there are no ticker tapes. So there have been many instances of a laborer in the middle of the night just falls down the shaft 10 stories and he dies. And the next day, work carries on. But because he's not documented, he has no ID, his family can't go complain about the death.
mhm. And but considering these conditions, how is the quality of the buildings that are being built that way? I mean, are they safe? Are they, I don't know.
No, they're not. So there are areas in Bombay where there is one building collapse every 6 months.
Mm.
There are so many areas where after the building has been constructed, 6 months, 1 year later, the building is leaning. And then 2 years later, it's leaning some more. The building next to it, I've seen buildings that are leaning like this against the building next to it. So they both, one collapses, the other collapses too. So it's crazy.
And what is the role of the police in all that? Because it's one of the focus of the film. How does the police react to what is happening?
It's the character of Ratnakar who chases the character of Dasru. The the police person in that entire narrative who best represents the system the way it is his boss. When he
Mm-hmm.
comes in the jeep and he says that, you know, this is a rubbish case. It's just a migrant. Nobody cares for a migrant. Just catch him and go home and sleep. Otherwise, it'll come in the news. It's just unnecessary shit. Why are we taking something this unnecessary so seriously? So that attitude is what allows this kind of a corrupt sort of system in at least the construction world to proliferate, because the police don't care. They have too many things to do. And like last almost 20 years ago, when I came to Bombay, I tried to find out, because I wanted to see, there are so many people coming to Bombay for opportunities every day. I wanted to know, what am I up against? If I've come to Bombay, how many people am I fighting for the same piece of that pie? So I read some statistics in 2003 that every day there were 12,500 people coming to Bombay simply to join the film industry.
Mm.
Maybe 90% go back by when they don't get opportunities. But just to know that I have arrived in Bombay, gotten off this train, and there are 12,500 people who are getting off trains at the same time, wanting the same thing from the city. So the police have their hands full. They don't have time for this.
So it's not that they are corrupt as a whole, you mean? It's like,
They're just exhausted. There aren't enough police people for the number of people in the population.
mhm. So you think like hiring more would be a solution?
I don't know. I mean, it's the way I think capitalistic society functions. You just hire more police because there's more crime, and then the police get corrupt, and then you hire more people to watch the who watches the watchmen, and then
Hmm.
the people who supervise. There's no end to that. I mean, what do you want to make this a police state with the amount of crime that's happening? So everyone is so exhausted of things in a system like this one, is what I have noticed, that they just want to get by with minimum damage. They're like, don't rock this adjustment. Let's just keep this going. You do your little bit of corruption, you make your little bit of money. Okay, one person died, three didn't die, right? When three die, raise an alarm. But if just one person's died, let's carry on with life, because there's too many things we need to look into. So that's the system, that's the thought process that sort of pervades the system.
Hmm. I feel that throughout your movies, one of the main themes is how violence is created. I think you show that people who are not violent in the beginning, due to the pressure they feel, they become violent in the end. Is that your opinion about how violence is created?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that nobody is born violent. Violence, I believe, is a response. And I mean, even the people in positions of power who enjoy perpetrating violence, at least when we see it from a distance, I believe it comes from somewhere. It must have come from something that must have been handed down to them as a family inheritance, that violence. So they weren't born with it. So, but when the minute, I mean, my stories uh, often are about people on the lowest rungs of that social ladder, because they are the ones who are least cared for, and they're the ones who will never be able to access the justice framework. Now, if you push them really hard, they'll have no choice but to push back, because they get pushed from all quarters. Not only are they being denied their basic rights, they are not spoken to with respect by anybody. They're spoken to with most disrespect by the legal system, by the police, and by the judiciary when they go for help. But they are robbed of their basic 3 meals a day. Forget 3 meals a day, 2 meals a day, 1 meal a day. Now, when you're deprived of that day after day for months and years, and then someone just comes and pushes you on pushes a button on something that you're sensitive to, I don't see how that person will not be violent because of the years of neglect and disrespect and disregard that the person has had to put up with. I feel that violence inside me, and I come from some sort of privilege. I haven't seen that really difficult life, but I've seen it from a distance, from a person perspective. But if I can feel it, I can only imagine how much that person must feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a miracle that everybody's not violent. People who are
Yeah.
not getting food are not violent. It's a miracle. We need to be thankful that not each one of them gets violent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And can you tell me a bit about the character of Fudo Karma, which I found one of the most interesting in the film?
Yeah, so there is a section of the tribal population that does want to embrace development because they don't want to be left behind. They don't want to not have what the city has. And somewhere I also, through Joram, the the messaging that I want to send out to the city people who will watch the film is that, we sit in the cities and we romanticize the tribal's life, that the tribal is a forest dweller, and it's the jungle and the village and the stream and the mountain, that beautiful paradise should not be touched. They should be allowed to live their life. But what I find scary is that in this romanticization we are otherizing the tribal even more. We are saying, let them be where they are, let us be where we are.
Mm-hmm.
But what if there's a tribal there who wants an Apple MacBook Pro? What if that tribal wants to go to a mall? What if that tribal wants to wear the clothes that we wear? Uh, who gave us the right to deny them that? So I thought that perspective somewhere needs to be in the film as well. And that is represented to some extent by Madhvi, Phulokarma's son who gets killed.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's trying to explain to the tribal, his own fellow tribals, that you can't fight this development monster for too long. I'm trying to get you your fair rates for your land. Sell now so that you get what city people have, so that we all move towards development together. He's young. He doesn't know the pitfalls of what he's talking about, but he's not wrong. He's
Mm-hmm.
presenting a perspective that is valid. And somewhere he pays the price for it because the rebels who fight on behalf of the tribals, most of whom are tribals, they are seeing it for the unjust trade-off that it is. So they are not wrong either. So it's a clash then of two mindsets that are not wrong on their own, but they are refusing to have dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And Pulo Karma is the violence that emerges from that conflict. She is that mother whose son got killed by an opposing belief system, and now she's on a revenge trip. So
Mm-hmm.
somewhere it was also like Ajji was me sort of I think now looking back that I romanticized revenge to a certain extent in Ajji, given it was a genre rape revenge kind of film. I wanted to see, could I pluck a character like Ajji out of a narrative like Ajji and make her the antithesis of your protagonist in a film like Joram? So Fulo Karma really is Ajji, but
Mm-hmm.
only she's trying to take down the person you're rooting for.
Mm-hmm.
How morally complicated could that become?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And why did you decide for the protagonist to carry a baby throughout the film?
Yeah, I mean, the title of the film comes from the baby,
Mm-hmm.
Joram. So it was, I mean, it could have been one man on the run, but somewhere the number of things this film hopefully is trying to say also includes I mean, a friend of mine who's an academic, she told me this term, which I didn't know before this film, ecofeminism. How the environment and ecology and sustainability are really feminine ideas, and the seat of life is inside the female. And so somewhere Joram, the little girl, represents that legacy of the world, of nature, of the environment, of ecology, that we are unable to protect, we are unable to carry forward, and we are having to sacrifice for this masculine idea of development, these monsters, and this very aggressive, violent destruction of the earth. So somewhere that girl represents that environmental idea that Dasru is trying to protect. And Dasru now has to run away to protect it, because within the paradigm of the city, you can't protect uh, ecofeminism. So it was that he's running with her, trying to find ways to keep her alive, so that that legacy, she becoming that legacy of nature, might get a chance to, I don't know, spring forth some new hope, some new sustainable uh, kind of tribal jungle forest natural life. So it all came from those ideas. So he's not just a man on the run. He's a man who's running to try and protect, save, and give another chance to the things that he believes in and the things that he comes from.
Yeah, I'm always curious about this thing. How do you cast a baby for such a role? I mean, who brings their babies to play this role? Because it's a difficult role. The baby like is in trouble, you know.
It took us months. So we knew we wanted a 4 to 5 month old baby because of the size and the weight.
Mm.
So we started, and this film was supposed to shoot in March last year. So we started looking for the baby in December. And so we had to be very mathematical about it. So the baby had to be 4 to 5 months in March. That baby had to be born in November. So we went looking for 3 to 4 week old babies. And we needed to sort of get a sense from the baby that the skin tone and the origins of the baby would sort of match a Dasru and a Vanu, and it would look like a tribal baby. So all of those things. But so we were looking in Jharkhand, where we finally shot the film. We were looking in Bombay because a lot of migrants from Jharkhand also, like other states, moved to Bombay to work in construction sites and all of those worlds. And hit, the third wave of COVID hit us in January last year. So the dates started getting pushed. So we had shortlisted 2 babies, and the dates got pushed to May and June. So those babies would be too big by then. So we had to let those babies go, and we started a new process. So it was really difficult and tricky finding the baby. But by the time we found this baby, and this baby was maybe a month old when we first met the baby, and we needed the baby to be like 4 months by May going into June. We suddenly, when we find the baby, we have no idea about the parents, because I've sent my team into slums and onto construction sites just looking for babies, and we find out that the father is from Jharkhand, from a small village from the area where I had set the story, and he was working on a construction site as a migrant laborer, and we didn't know that. So somehow those pieces, when you keep looking, keep looking, keep looking with a lot of earnestness, you find the baby that represents what your film is trying to say. So this baby came with that spirit, and this baby was outstanding. We were shooting I mean, it's inhuman to take a baby into 50 degrees heat, but we had all kinds of safety protocol in place, and the parents were the baby at all times. But this baby was a special soul. Nothing rattled this baby.
Okay.
And
Yeah. And okay, did you have to pay the parents for the baby to be in, if you can say that?
Of course,
Okay.
of course,
Yeah.
of course. We had to take good care of them, because it's yes, it sounds like a fun romantic thing to have your baby in a movie, but it's also taking them away from all those days of labor that would get them their wages, and it's putting the baby in a very compromising place, because a shooting set of this kind, where every day we're shooting in a different location and real locations that you can't fully control, it's I mean, I'm risking saying this as the director producer of this film. It's putting the baby at risk too. So we had to be very, very careful and very cognizant of the baby's needs. So we had the parents around at all times, and they were our primary concern on every day of shoot.
Okay. And can you tell me a bit about the rest of the casting for the 3 protagonists, let's say?
So the casting process on all the films I make is an extensive one. We do a lot of workshops, and first we cast. I mean, that takes months. But in this film, really tricky thing was the mix of non-actors, of people from different regions who actually speak in slightly different accents, and actors who are stalwarts like Manoj Bajpayee, Tanisha Chatterjee, Rajshri Deshpande, Mohammad Zishan Ayub, actors who are top of their game today and come from years of acting and have found their style. To merge all these people to make a frame where they are all inhabiting a particular kind of world. So that took a lot of workshopping, and we came up with the dialect of this film. So it's not, I mean, we borrowed from existing dialects, but the dialect spoken in this film is not per se an existing dialect in the world. We came up with it so that all the people who have slightly different accents, once we come on the same page with this dialect, it will hopefully feel like they all inhabit the same world. So it was an extensive process, and there was a big team behind it. So we had a casting. There was a casting team in Bombay. There was a casting team in Jharkhand. There were multiple casting teams in Jharkhand. Teams that were that specialize in tribal actors, but those tribal actors have never faced a camera before. They've never met people outside of their regions. So for us to go there and break the ice, make them comfortable, instill confidence, then bring them and all the other kinds of actors into the same rehearsal space and start playing out the scenes. There was a really fine actor who conducted the workshops, Bhumika Dubey, with a team of actors who are in the film, Sanjeev, Suman. So that itself is a process of about 2 to 3 months before we enter shoot. Otherwise, it's impossible to make these frames, if they look hopefully believable, it's impossible to make them believable until everyone has arrived into the same world.
And can you tell me a bit about the cinematography, what you wanted to do in the visual aspect of the movie?
Yeah, this brings me to one of my favorite collaborators on this film, Piyush Putty. This guy has he shot a lot of feature films that are very static frames and tracking shots. But he had shot this one short doc many years ago that I saw and I remembered. And like all my other films, I wanted a handheld, kinetic kind of energy in this one. But in this one, I needed it to be a lot more physical, because Dasru, Manoj Bajpayee's character, when he's on the run and he's coming closer and closer to the jungles that he came from, he's also becoming a little more feral. You are seeing a little more animal-like qualities in his body and the way he runs and the way he crouches with his baby and and just the way he inhabits his spaces. So I needed the camera to be so open to the kinetic flow of the actors and the spaces energies that I needed someone fit and ready and hungry to become that animal with that camera. So Piyush was that man. And again, we spent months from December up to May. We were uh, prepping, exploring, experimenting. He was there in the workshops. So the camera and the actors, I try and get them into the same spaces again and again so that they can find that combined uh, moving energy. Like often on films like this, where the cinematography doesn't sit with the performance. I've seen a lot of films like this in India where there's handheld camera, but the actors are doing something else. The energies are not sort of fitting into each other. The camera and the actors in those films, I suspect, have not spent enough time with each other. So the actor has found their rhythm, but the camera has pre-decided a rhythm, and the two are not being able to find a meeting ground. So I bring all of them into the same space, and Piyush in the workshops would constantly dance with a camera, just trying to follow the actor's movement. So if you see Ratnakar's entire track and if you see Dasru's entire track, they're both handheld, but there's a different interaction of that handheld camera with those actors. It tends to become a little more flowing with Ratnakar, but it's a little more animal-like with Dasru. When Dasru runs, it becomes quite frenetic because Dasru's running like an animal and he'll disappear in a second. So all of that happened over those workshops and over all those trials and experimentations.
Can you tell me a bit about the train scene, which I feel is one of the most impressive, but also looks very difficult to shoot inside the train?
Yeah, yeah. The train scene was a production miracle. So my producer, Anupama Bose, just a word about her before we continue. This is her first film as producer, but she's been around for years. She's worked with NFDC. She used to run the producers lab at the Film Bazaar. And she's been content development head at Phantom Films in the past. And she was a distributor with movie scenes. She used to distribute independent films. So she came on this film with this hunger and energy to see a film this independent, but at this scale, to see it made in the right manner, because I had not operated at this scale before. The kind of scale that a Z studio finally on a film like this allowed us to manage. So the train sequence was always uh, going to be a bit of a nightmare. We were all dreading how we put together this train sequence. So, given the kind of filmmaker I am, I was quite keen to shoot it in a moving train. I kept trying to figure out that can we get a train over a 4 hour stretch of track that can just run back and forth, and we keep shooting. But as the weeks passed, I realized that's a very greedy thing to ask for, because just the production hassle of being on a moving train and to figure out the stoppages and to then match the light when you moving in the opposite direction, to just manage the actors and give them a safe space, in a train where such dynamic things are happening, where people are falling out of the train. So we quickly realized that it won't happen in a moving train. It'll have to be a mix. There are some shots of the train moving around the platform when it leaves the platform, enters the platform. But other than that, it was a static train that we then green screened and some VFX with. So the camera then had to compensate for the absence of movement. So there is again over there the actors and the cinematographer and the production team coming together to make this scene look believable. And again, like I said, we were going to shoot in March, and March is, in terms of weather, it's a fairly comfortable month, just coming out of winter and just pre-summer across the country. But COVID hit in January, and Manoj and all the other actors' dates sort of started shifting because a lot of projects got stalled and they overlapped with our shoot dates. We went into May, which is the hottest month in India, and we were shooting in the hottest state in India, Jharkhand. So we hit 50 degrees in Jharkhand in May.
Oh.
And then when we came to the Bombay schedule, we started on the 3rd of June, which was the first day of the monsoons.
Oh.
And because I had a very tight schedule, because so many actors' dates had to be juggled because things shifted because of COVID, that I could not move my dates to non-raining days. So we had to shoot on rainy days, praying and hoping that the rain won't destroy our plans. So on the day we put up this train set, the Met department had said that it would be light or no rainfall. And there was an unprecedented storm. And our entire set of 3 compartments with 3 carriages covered with green screens and tarpaulins and iron and wooden frameworks with about 150 lights. It collapsed. The lights caught fire. The entire set got destroyed. So we were up against these kinds of things because the elements were testing us. I didn't expect that because I thought we'll shoot in March and we'll be fine. But we had the hottest summer and the wettest monsoon over 30 days of the shoot.
Mm-hmm. There seems to be a movie there regarding how the movie was shot, actually.
I think all difficult independent films, there's a movie behind the making of the movie. I've seen a lot of filmmakers and their producers go through similar things. It's something you got to allow. What I learned on this film called Black Friday, that was the first film I worked on with Anurag. And on that film, there was so much that was out of control in the worlds that we were shooting in, that I saw that energy infecting and informing the energy within the frame. So if you've seen Black Friday, that palpable energy that you see in the frame is really the madness that's happening outside of it. That's just infiltrating. That's affecting the actors and affecting the elements in the frame, and the audience, it translates to the audience, and the audience feels the restlessness of people on the run. So hopefully in this film, every time we face this, there was an incredible production team led by Anupama that sort of uh, just held it together, and then a creative team that is so in tune with 5 6 months of pre-production that that energy is coming into the frame. We don't try to shut it out, we just let it inform the madness inside the frame. So the train sequence, given that it's a static train and we're cheating it, I'm hoping that it feels so frenetic is because outside of that frame is chaos, is madness, is pandemonium, is heartbreak, is anxiety, is palpitations, and it's all coming into the frame, coming into the frame.
Okay, so now I'm curious, what kind of budget did you have? Because the production seems huge in terms of time and actors and people there.
Not in terms of time. A film like this needs about 52 days of shoot. We shot it in under 30 because we didn't have the kind of budgets that a film like this needs. Which brings me actually to Z Studios. This is the first time one of the biggest studios of Bollywood has backed a film this independent and artistic in what it's trying to do, this political even. So it's a marriage of independent producers and a studio that I have not seen in the last 20 years in my 20 years in Bombay. So yes, we couldn't get the budgets that a film like this needs, but I think it's a miracle that a film like this even got made. And it's a testament to the production team again that led by Anupama that managed to make a film with this tight a budget look about 3 times bigger than its budget. And that is something also that I learned on Black Friday. Black Friday, really, that one film that I worked on was like a film school for me. What I learned on that, because that film traces the bomb blasts of 1993 in Bombay, the city almost became like a set. We would just, and that was a time before, no, it was post 911, but the world was not as paranoid as the world became about 8 10 years after that. So the police didn't sort of stop you from just walking into a street with a camera and do something. But 8 10 years later, the world became a different place. Now you can't just walk into a place and do what you want to do without 10 people raising an alarm. So back then, we used to just a small crew used to just be going with actors, getting into a space, shooting a scene, and leaving. So I saw the city become a set. It's almost like we are shooting on that set at will. So that's something that has helped me in the films that I've made, especially on Joram. On Aji and Bhosle, of course. But even on Joram, when you access the real world, and in Joram, I've managed hopefully to do it at a larger scale, in bigger spaces because of the kind of producers I had. To access it, not getting intimidated by the reality of that space. Like I enter an iron ore mine which is baking at 50 degrees, and the earth of that region has ferrous oxide, so it's like rusted iron that you're walking on, not earth. And you have these big machines moving about. It was apocalyptic. Now I walk in there, I can either get intimidated by the reality of that space, given that I'm an outsider and I don't know how to navigate it, or I just look at it as, okay, this is a set. Let me look for my frame. And within that frame, let me start creating my reality. So that thing that I learned on Black Friday has really helped me in all my films, especially this one, to literally treat these difficult, large spaces that we don't inhabit on a daily basis like a set, because all that matters really is the frame, not the rest of the space.
Okay. Okay, and last question, I guess, can you tell me what are you working on next? Any future plans?
I don't know. I mean, you've been part of Aji and Bhosle's release journey. It takes me years to set up a film. On this one, especially, it's been, like I said, miraculous because we had Z Studios, which is a studio that this is the first time they've done a film like this, but they seek to do more. They are trying to, which no studio in India has done before. They're trying to bridge that gap between, commercial release, commercial accessibility, and a very independent not art house, artistic festival kind of journey. They're trying to merge these two with a film like Joram. And my producer Anupama, she comes from not just a narrative fiction space. She comes from documentary. She comes from experimental fiction. So I'm seeing the studio on the one side and Anupama on the other, and I'm seeing that there are a lot of possibilities outside of what I have done until now. So I don't know where I might head next. Maybe it'll be a much bigger film. Maybe it'll be a much smaller film. Maybe it'll be a short film. Or maybe I'll just write a novel. So I don't know.
But you cannot sit idle, can you?
No, I'm very restless. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Panos. This was a pleasure.
Okay, this was ASEAN Movie Pulse interviews, and have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.